19 after 9 o'clock, and a very warm welcome to our Polokwane listeners on One Nation FM. Thank you indeed for joining us. And let me just tell you what's coming up in the next hour. We're going to be talking to Khaled Jassat. He's an author, a poet, and he is a master coach. He teaches NLP. We're going to be talking about International Mentoring Day. Also on the show, activist writer Lunga Mahlangu is going to be talking about inequality damaging the economic growth in South Africa. But first up, in the second hour, we're going to be talking with the lovely Lungile Mashele. She is an economy expert. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the program, and thank you indeed for your patience.
Good morning to you and your listeners, and thank you for having me.
Okay, so Lungile, South Africans, according to you as an energy expert and a whole host of other experts, are suggesting that we should expect higher stages of power outages by the next week. Now, what is the highest stage we can go to, and what would that mean for us as South Africans? Would that mean a total blackout right across the board?
So let me just clarify that the whole reason South Africa experiences load shedding is to avoid the total collapse of the grid and thus a complete blackout. This is why we have load shedding. So you basically have an infinite number of load shedding stages that you can go through. So if you look at stage one, that's about 1,000 megawatts that Eskom requires of demand to be suppressed. Stage four is 4,000. Stage eight is 8,000. Now, when these stages were implemented, it was in 2007, 2008. And I don't think that we ever thought we were going to get to a point where we reach stage eight. And so it simply just ended there. Stage eight does not mean a blackout. It will simply mean 8,000 megawatts is being required in terms of demand suppression. Now, you can obviously go up to stage 9, stage 10, stage 15. It doesn't really matter. It's actually infinite what they can ask for. If you look at other countries in the region, you've got Zimbabwe that's doing up to 20 hours of load shedding on a daily basis. You've got Zambia that's doing up to 12 hours a day of load shedding as well. So anything or any iteration is possible as long as it still maintains the integrity of the grid and we do not end up having a complete blackout.
So government was obviously sleeping on this issue, and I'm wondering about the role of people like yourselves, energy experts and energy economists, etc. Would the guys, or should the guys, not have alerted the powers that be to say this is where we're headed for? And we know Eskom. I mean, we've talked about it on this radio station and all other media platforms over and over and over again. And we kind of asked the question, could it not have been mitigated? Obviously, people were sitting on their hands. Having said that, a good few years ago, the writing was on the wall. Why do you believe we were not proactive?
So, Julie, you're saying that people were sitting on their hands. Actually, not. They had their hands in the cookie jar, and this is part and parcel of why we are where we are currently. This issue first came to a fore in 1997 when the then CEO of Eskom alerted Parliament, government, and said, if we do not do anything in the next 10 years, we will experience load shedding. And it's true as day. In 2007, we started experiencing load shedding in this country. You then had a period between 2007 and 2008 where then the decision was then taken to build Medupi, Kusile, and Ngula. During this time, you then had the ANC through the investment arm, Chancellor House, who then had an investment in Hitachi Power Africa, one of the boiler contracts, and they made a 5,000% ROI, return on investment, on this particular transaction. You then find ourselves over time, you've got delays, time cost overruns, design defects on Medupi and Kusile. You then have a period where we're getting new installed capacity coming online, and this is through the renewables. Up to date, almost 7,200 megawatts of new renewable capacity has been added. We had Avon and Dedisa, which are gas IPPs also come on board. So a lot has been done, but at the same time, this was supposed to have been supplemented by an Eskom fleet which is being maintained so that it is reliable. Eskom did not meet their end of the bargain. And this is why we're in the situation that we're in now. If you look at South Africa's installed capacity, it's almost 52,000 megawatts. If you then include the renewables, we're almost at 60,000 megawatts. The issue is not the supply. The supply is there. It's Eskom's fleet, which has not been maintained adequately over the last couple of years, in essence.
Okay, we do know that the IFP and a whole host of other civil society organizations, including the DA, are threatening legal action against Eskom. Is it going to matter? Are they going to make any strides, knowing that Eskom is almost broke? I mean, physically and metaphorically. Is it going to make any difference? Because that legal action is not going to spur them into action to start making things happen. Because as you've indicated, those power stations have a whole host of problems, design problems, second grade, third grade equipment that it was built with, people with their hands in the cookie jar, etc., etc., etc. So there's all of that very dark history that's attached to these lords of darkness who are Eskom. People wasting their time and money as far as legal action is concerned. Would you agree with me?
So I will agree with you in one aspect that nothing can change, nothing will change, simply because that's not how a coal fleet works or how a utility works. It is broken, it needs to be fixed, it needs money, it needs planning, it needs people on board, it needs project management companies, consulting engineers, equipment. There's a whole host of things that it needs. So it cannot happen overnight. However, I do think that this is symbolic and it is very necessary. We are not sitting where we're sitting as a result of an energy crisis. We're sitting where we're sitting as a result of a political crisis. And perhaps that politics or that political crisis needs to be met with equal and perhaps legal force on the other side. It is symbolic, it is necessary. People are tired, people have lost food, they've lost lives. Through not having, ventilators or equipment failing. You've got hospitals that are saying that we've had to move 24 babies overnight or in the last couple of minutes because if we hadn't, there's no oxygen, there is no electricity in that particular area. We have had accidents on the roads, robots not working. There have been numerous issues, and it's about time civil society stands up and says, enough is enough. We will not live like this. And if you want us to live like this, you are going to have to go. It's important in that aspect. Will it change anything the very next day? Absolutely not. We'll still be load shedding.
Okay, let's look at the issue around, and I don't know if this is a joke, how seriously we should be taking this, or should we be outraged? We are hearing now that Gwede Mantashe is going to be overseeing Eskom under his ministry. Is that a good idea? Knowing that he's hell-bent on bringing the Turkish car power ships into our harbors, is that going to help us at all, or is that just going to further line his pockets?
So, there have been allegations about misappropriation of funds and involvement that has been vented out in court, and nothing has been found, like in terms of car power and the DMRE. The car power certainly has its benefits. People, however, are rather complaining about the tenure of that contract, of the power purchase agreement, that you cannot have a 20-year emergency. But in terms of the car power, whether it works or not, absolutely, it works. Has it been installed in other countries around the world? Definitely. In Africa alone, there are about 3 countries using those power ships. And they do provide emergency power, which is what we actually need in this country. If we had, let's say, the likes of car power that was installed already, we would at least shave away one stage of load shedding. So instead of being at stage 6, we would have been at stage 5. In terms of ESCOM going to DMRE, so you will recall that DMRE only looks at policy. They don't look at oversight. Oversight lies with Pravin Gordhan in the DPE. And if you look at DPE and its consortium of companies that are under it, whether it's SAA, which has failed, whether various entities have basically failed. If you look at DMRE, they've basically got PASA, the Petroleum Agency, they've got NERSA, they've got CEF, entities that are functioning, they've got full functioning boards, they still meet the mandate. All that would be happening by ESCOM moving to DMRE is that you then have the policy happening in one place and you have oversight of ESCOM also happening in that place. One of the greatest failings of ESCOM being at the DPE over the last 5 or so years has been the lack of oversight. And the minister came out, Gordhan, saying that he does not believe in being hands-on and that he is very much a laissez-faire minister and he lets CEOs do what they want to do. 5 years later, we've just experienced the worst load shedding this country has ever had. The CEO has never been held accountable. He's never been called to order in terms of what has happened. The only people who have sort of called him and said, listen, this is not going to fly, is actually the DMRE minister and the Treasury minister as well.
Okay, the sad thing is that here in South Africa, we don't see political heads rolling. Maybe once that starts happening and we do away with cadre deployment, etc., maybe there will be hope for the country. Let's wrap up by asking this all-important question for people like yourself and maybe myself as well. Perhaps, just perhaps, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We may consider going off the grid, but at a price, obviously. Is that a good idea? And how much of that load, that middle class that will, go that route, how much burden will they take off the grid? Or make available supply by going off the grid, so to speak. Lungile,
so it's
did
hard
you
to
hear my
say what their
question?
contribution is going to be,
Okay.
only because a number of people that are looking at various solutions. Now, I want to clarify, going off the grid means you call ESCOM or your municipality and you say, please come and disconnect me. I no longer want to be connected. Very few people, if any, are actually doing this. Most people are supplementing the grid, which means that for certain hours in the day, you rely on solar, and for certain hours, you go back to your municipality or you go back to ESCOM. Now, these systems that most people deploy are solar home systems. They come with panels, you've got batteries, you've got inverters. They cost anything between 50,000 to 500,000, depending on what you're going to do on your roof. So it's not a cheap or an easy solution. And I do want to caution people that yes, people do sell you 20-year warranties or guarantees and say, this will last you 20 years. In normal conditions where you're not running down your battery as much as you're running it down now. In South Africa, we're running down batteries 4 or 5 times a day. In most countries, around the world where people have installed solar PV panels, they only run down their batteries maybe like 5 times a year. So you're taking a very extreme situation. Your battery will not last 20 years. Whether you've got a lithium battery, gel battery, it will not last the stated time. If you're lucky, you'll get a third of that time, which means that after 6-7 years, you now need to remove this 200,000-300,000 rand equipment and then replace it, only because it's not meant to be run the way that we're running. So I would caution people, if you are looking at those solutions, they work. They're brilliant. I use a solar PV system. However, I'm fully aware that it's not going to last the 20-year stated period.
That's not good news at all. Thank you indeed for being with us. And oh gosh, all I can say is that we're going to be watching this space very keenly, going forward. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with this morning regarding being savvy power users and just, protecting ourselves, our home, our provisions, etc.?
So I would absolutely say that let's watch what we consume. Let's try and reduce as much as we can. We don't have to have all the lights in the home, all the time. You don't have to run your pool pump 3, 4 times a day, once a week even works. So on the demand side, look at that. We do know that load shedding stages are increasing, stage 4, stage 5, stage 6. At the same time, do not go and coupled with that, then you have outages which last anything up to 48 hours or 60 hours. So do not fill up your freezer or your fridge. Try and be lean, maybe buy every three days, especially if you're in areas that are susceptible to such outages. Try and be lean in most things that you actually do. Even when people try and sell you ideas, solutions, read the terms and conditions. There are lots of companies out there springing up out of nowhere trying to sell people rental contracts and rent to own contracts. Read everything thoroughly. You might find yourself on the hook for an evergreen lifetime contract where you're paying 1,500 a month, even when you are unemployed. So be very careful of little schemes and people selling you into things that are going to leave you financially worse off. Because remember, you need to pay for that system. You also need to pay Eskom or your municipality as well.
Ooh, Lungile, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. Frightening at the same time. I'm nervous about, how we move forward in South Africa as responsible citizens, but I guess we need to apply our minds. But thank you indeed for your time, and God bless.
Only a pleasure. God bless you too.
It is exactly 9:36. Standing by to talk to us is Lunga Mahlangu. He is an activist writer, and the question he asks is inequality damaging economic growth in South Africa? Let's hear from him.